everyone. Dr. Tom Warcroft back here with you for this episode of the Healing from Lyme Disease Summit. And today we're in for a real treat. We're going to be talking with Dr. Sunджья Швейг, who I've known for many, many years now. I think it's probably approaching a decade now. We've done a lot of work together in the Lyme world with ILADS and other organizations. And the thing that I really wanted to talk about today was a lot of these emerging botanical treatments that a lot of you have been hearing about. And as you know, one of the things I love is marrying that art of medicine with the science of medicine. And I've been using botanicals in my practice since I started 14, 15 years ago. But the thing was, we were just basing it on sort of our clinical experience and what other people said probably should have maybe worked. But what was so great about Sунджья's work and all the other folks that I'm sure he'll tell us about is they dug into some of the core pieces of Lyme and Bartonella and even Babesia duncani, and found ways to research these herbs so that we know exactly what herbs are doing what. And that really, for my practice and so many of the practitioners in our mentorship program, has revolutionized the way we're able to treat patients so that we're not guessing as much as we used to. And so I love the evidence base. And I mean, he's been doing this work in functional medicine for so long and motivating so many other physicians and even patients to go to this next level, combining that art and medicine. So Sunджья Швейg, thanks for joining us, man. I'm stoked for our conversation.
Tom, it's great to be here. Thank you so much for putting this summit together. I think the opportunity to get this information out to other practitioners, clinicians, health coaches, as well as the public is so valuable. People are hungry for this information. We know that. So thank you for having me here, and thanks for putting all the work into making this happen.
Oh, you're welcome. And again, it's such an honor because it's like, it's like I grow up in this field and I'm like, all these people around me, I'm like, oh my God, it's like, when you dedicate yourself to it, you're almost like, it's like a starstruck thing. Cause it's like, I get to hang out with all these super cool, big mind people who are kind of like, we're all in the same place. We're really looking to help people and change their outcomes. And, I talk so many of us are looking at persisters and other things, and before we kind of dive into those things, so I think this is the crux of making a massive shift in the way we treat people. If you're an MD sitting around, like, you start to get into functional medicine, like what would make you just take this time out of like direct patient care and all these other projects and really decide to focus on research on botanical medicines? Like what got you into it?
Yeah, I mean, I think, with your intro, and I know this about you, I think we share a lot of the same values, which is that we want to provide the highest level care for people. We want to work on these complex, poorly visualized, poorly understood illnesses, and we want to help people get better. And when you're doing that in the trenches day in and day out, you quickly realize this incredible need that's out there to back up some of what we're doing with research. And I love the science. I love the biochemistry and the background of how all these treatments are working, whether it's antibiotics or botanical medicines. And so when I come across researchers like Dr. Ying Zhang, who is really thinking about, his original work was on TB early in his career. And so he spent a lot of time in the trenches with extremely persistent bugs. And then he started to branch out, as we all saw, right? He had some early studies on variety of different compounds, antimicrobials, antibiotics, and a lot of us started pivoting our work to kind of match up with kind of some of the findings that he was showing of efficacy of these drugs. And then, amazingly, wonderfully, he started to pivot into more natural medicines, and that's kind of when I met up with him. And the opportunity to do this research, like you said, yes, it does require a lot of time. You have to take time out of your practice. You have to take time on nights and weekends, and my friend and colleague, your friend and colleague as well, Jacob Leone, and I were, deep in the trenches with this research and paper writing. And I remember sitting in the room at ILADS conference when we were all there together. We took a few hours together and just kind of holed up in our room up on the 13th, 14th floor somewhere and just wrote. We just had like, okay, we got to grab this time. And why do we do it? We do it because we want to figure out what's going to work, how to get people better, how to get more answers, how to push the scientific agenda forward, right? I think that's a key piece of solving this puzzle. Is we got to get the science out there. We got to speak the language of some of those people, practitioners, researchers who maybe don't believe in the complexity of these conditions. And so if we can speak that language, we can get the papers published and get that research up, we start to change the course of this whole epidemic, I believe.
You know, it's just resonant. I mean, this whole summit is about like giving people hope and new understanding and this healing experience. And when I hear physicians not going off the deep end with all the conspiracy and all these, all this is really complicated. And I just really want to like highlight what you just said is one of the most important things. And what I love about you and Jacob and even Ying Zhang is the thing is, when we look at all this, we need to be speaking the language of other physicians and other scientists so that we can change the conversation. Yes, a lot of other things may be true. Certain things that we don't have research on may work, but whenever we can get research, especially into things that are misunderstood, then we can start to bring more people into the fold, so to speak, and help. So, I mean, I just think it's such an important piece, and I'm really appreciate the fact that you guys are doing this because it changes the way I help people, but it also changes the way I can have conversations with conventional physicians who are maybe open to this. So, I mean, kudos, great job.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, no, it was an honor and a pleasure to be able to do this work with Dr. Zhang and Johns Hopkins. So thank you. I really appreciate that.
Yeah. So there's this, and it's so funny. I just a minute ago, I caught myself, I said Dr. Zhang, and I was like, I know that it's Dr. Zhang. I say it, I correct everybody all the time. I'm like, man, but it's so funny when you get on the roll, you get so excited. And I've had the pleasure of being able to present at conferences with him and have conversations. And it's like, I just spoke on methylene blue last weekend, and it's like, we would never even be rediving into these things if it weren't for a few rogue people like you and Jacob and Ying, and it's important. So to me, one of the things, like, why would you, so if you had the option, right, you meet these great people, you could start researching more. They're doing research on drugs. They're doing research on methylene blue, which is a medical dye that acts as a drug. Why not go down that path? What would make you choose botanical medicines to really spend this research time on?
Yeah, so I mean, my core values and core beliefs really do, land in, the first, do no harm and pick the treatments that are the most benign, and, and a huge respect for the natural order of things and for the wisdom of a lot of these natural therapies, botanical medicines, dietary supplements, lifestyle interventions. That's really the core of my practice. And that's how I started out with, my functional medicine practice, which I knew I wanted to do this work even way before I went to med school, and a lot of this I was exposed to in my childhood growing up. And it was actually the Lyme piece that came second for me, when my wife was diagnosed with Lyme disease in 2008, after over a decade of mystery symptoms that started after, we lived in upstate New York in Ithaca. And so I really had already just started in my functional medicine practice, and then Lyme, landed on my doorstep in a very personal way and in a very intense way, a very scary way. So I really, at that point, have always been very interested, like you, in, this has to be a combination therapy, and we're going to get the best outcomes if we nail down all the lifestyle pieces, we get people really, really dialed in. And then we start, leveraging anything that's going to help. And that might be an antibiotic, that might be an anti-parasitic drug, it might be a botanical medicine, it might be a dietary supplement in a targeted fashion. There's a variety of different avenues there. So the botanical medicines were always a core part of my practice and interest. And so again, when we had the opportunity to start to try to put more science behind those, it was a natural yes. It was one of those full body yeses that yeah, I'm going to do that. So,
right, it's so cool. Like I found it's funny, for this year, like around New Year's, I was like, oh, you know what? I'm going to simplify. I'm just going to go with the flow. And then the next day I go, I'm going to add one more thing, and the word is no, right? So because people like you and I say yes because we want to help so much, and a lot of times we have to say no, except if it's totally mission driven. And that's like, I chills up my spine as you're saying that. It's like, I know what mission Sунджья's on,
Yeah, I mean, we all do this work, and it's very intense work, and we can be pushing burnout, but the things that pull us back from that are those passion projects that just like light you up. It's just like, that's so exciting. I'm, in the groove, just feeling it. And yeah, so it was an amazing opportunity. And it was cool too, because I was able to interface with both sides of of the world, with the research side, with the science side, and also with the master herbalists, and kind of bring them into the fold. Eric Yarnell, Brian Key Weisbach. I even spoke with Stephen Buhner at one point and asked him to advise us. That was actually a funny story. He really didn't like the idea. He's like, no, that's kind of not a great thing to even study at all, because it's so reductionist, and that's not the wisdom of the plants. And no, I'm not going to participate in, an in vitro study. And I said, you know what? I totally get where you're coming from. I respect that. I appreciate it. I still think it's important to do this work and to do this science so that we can move things down the road one more step and start to speak that language. But I also respect where he was coming from, because it is very reductionist, and we'll talk about that, some of the shortcomings of this research, and why this in vitro study in a test tube has some limitations relative to the wisdom of these plants.
Well, it's interesting. Several of the people we've talked to are not about these particular plants, but other plants. Like when we pull extracts out, not of the whole herb extract, but like with cannabis, like people pull out little parts of it and they think that is like the whole effect. And it's really, Mother Nature makes these herbs to be used as a whole herb. But also, I think also we have these brains that the divinity of life, however you define that, has put in this ability to think. So we've been able to take pieces out that, when used properly and understood properly, can actually be beneficial. So it's really interesting. And the thing I would point out for me, there are some of these herbs that we're going to talk about in just a moment that I was maybe using sometimes, maybe I was using for a different reason. And we know they're traditional uses, but you've opened the research you guys have been so brave enough to do has opened up a new way of healing. We're using things to address some of these infections that otherwise we would have not been using. So I do think the reductionist gives us an opening into the next steps. And one of those next steps is really like this persister thing, right? And I talk a lot about the stationary forms or persister non-growing forms. And one of the things that for whatever reason in your studies, we've got stationary forms, persisters, and non-growing mentioned in the same paper and in different ones. So we like to confuse people a little, but why don't can you give us some clarity on what a persister cell is and how they're really relevant in tick-borne illness?
Absolutely. And I think it's a really, really key part of this whole story, that we really believe, and many doctors and researchers are starting to see this more and more, that this concept of this persister cell is a really important reason why a lot of patients might fail treatment or relapse. And these persister cells are basically this subpopulation of tolerant cells that are, basically not going to be killed by an antibiotic or by an antimicrobial. They can survive this exposure and much better than the majority of this cell population. And we know that this persister phenomenon is found in almost all different bacterias, including human, animal, plant pathogens, et cetera, and including Lyme disease. And that these persisters can form basically these different morphological colonies and can exist within biofilms, right? Another very important concept of where these persisters are hiding out. And that they can basically go into this metabolically dormant or reduced metabolic state and just kind of hunker down and wait for that pressure of this, attack, this antibiotic or this antimicrobial to go away, right? And so, like how does this play out with a Lyme patient, for example? Well, we might be prescribing therapies, prescribing antibiotics, a combination of antibiotics maybe, and then hopefully, they get better. If we're on the right track, they get better, they feel better. And basically what we've done is we've killed off a lot of those active replicating bugs, the spirochetes or these other co-infections. Think of it almost like we went in with like a weed whacker, right? Just kind of buzzed the terrain and kind of took care of like, these obvious ones that were sprouting up, right? But because these bacteria are able to form these antibiotic tolerant cells, and basically there's like, it's biphasic, basically. There's, anytime you have persisters, you have this phenomenon where there's at least two different populations. There's one which is going to be killed off kind of quickly, and you're going to take care of those. And there's this other one, which again is this persister or tolerant one, which, basically goes into this dormant state, but is not killed off, right? So then you have this patient, you give them treatment, they hopefully feel better if we're on the right track. But because there was some of these antibiotic tolerant or persister cells, when you stop the therapy, they kind of regroup, right? They kind of come back out of the woodwork. We've all seen this, right? And this explains a lot of the frustration, right? That patients and practitioners can experience, that the antibiotics might help, the antimicrobials might help, but then they get this relapse, right? And so we talk a lot about, the dismount with Lyme therapy, right? Like when can you safely stop and how long do you wait before you decide, okay, we're good, or, oh, looks like things are coming back, right? But again, this persister phenomenon, we do see it as a really key factor.
So, my experience has been from the beginning, and from being mentored by other folks to now mentoring other physicians myself after all these years. It's like, this is the crux. I mean, obviously we've talked throughout the summit, and so many people know we're looking at, you know, there's all these pieces like the terrain and the gut and your limbic system. But when we're looking at the bugs themselves, the one thing I find in this field is the bugs are so persistent and tolerant, and like those other things are also important, but you're really hitting on the key here is like, because it's this interconnection between the host and the pathogens and all the toxins. Why are, like, compared to medications, I mean, aside from, like, you and I obviously have this personal medical model that we want to be as natural as humanly possible, but why would botanical medicines be so attractive for doing things like addressing these persister populations of these tick-borne illnesses?
Yeah, so when we did those studies, we did some, Dr. Zhang and his model, compared these botanical medicines to some of the commonly used antibiotics against these bugs, right? And the antibiotics, are again, can be effective, but are pretty simplistic in their activity. And for the most part, antibiotics work best when these bugs are actively dividing, right? They mess with some part of the machinery or the cell wall or like some kind of cellular activity of these bugs. And when they're actively dividing, the antibiotics go in there and break stuff up and kill the bugs. But they start to fail when these bugs go into this dormant or persister phase. Botanical medicines, are very, very interesting. And again, they have a variety of different. Each plant has many, frequently like up to 60, 100 or more different active components, right? So you're using this very complex networked system of activity, and some of those activities might be antimicrobial, meaning they're going to do something to kill the bug, something like kind of akin to an antibiotic. But on the other hand, they might have immune stabilizing effects. They might have anti-inflammatory effects. They might have help for detoxification or help with reactive oxygen species or antioxidant support. And so and that's just one plant, right? But then you start to combine these plants and they work synergistically, right? So Chinese medicine, traditional, Western herbal medicine, a lot of it is about how do you combine these plants? How do you use that synergy to boost the efficacy and to leverage different activities of these plants? And so all of a sudden now, instead of having this one single activity that this antimicrobial is doing, like an antibiotic, you have this almost like this orchestra effect that's happening. And these herbal medicines are really, again, having all these different potential benefits that are working in synergy with the organism. And so the layers of complexity are really almost staggering and really, frankly, beautiful, right? So, and I think, a lot of these plants have evolved over billions of years with these bugs. And so they can be synergistic with some of these bugs and in killing these bugs or helping you recover.
It's so, I think it's just so impressive. Like when I read the rap sheet, if you will, of like what some of the herbs we're about to talk about can do. It's like one of the things that just strikes me so much about what you're saying and about what I know they do is they're so supportive of the entire being during the process of killing something that may not really be in proper balance or not even supposed to be in your body. And it's like, to me, it's like the antibiotics, like it's kind of like we kill stuff and then we have to detoxify both the dead stuff and the metabolite of the medicine.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like every once in a while you find a medicine that does a little bit more, but it's really like maybe one or two or three things at best, right? And these and a lot of what the number three thing they do is the side effects, right? So it's like the herbs are so good, and it's just so great. And as you're talking, I was thinking about, why wouldn't an herbalist want us to reduce this and figure it out? But again, it's like it does take away in some respects the magical power of this plant that we've used for thousands of years. But as I said, it opens us up into this new way of experiencing them and new understanding. So I was hoping that you would be willing to take a deep dive into some of these. There's a key group of herbs here that have really put themselves right at the top. And I can't wait. I'm not going to say too much more because there's one that I really love. It's like, and sort of where you see that it's better than an antibiotic, and it has all these fringe positive side effects. This is what we need to be talking about in the Lyme field and in the summit. So maybe you can highlight some of these big ones for us.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, drum roll, please. Everyone's read the studies, but, the herb Cryptolepis sanguinolenta really emerged as a really impressive player. And, Cryptolepis is an herb which has been used traditionally for malaria in Africa. And so we knew about it, and a lot of people were using it prior to this research for Babesia, like organisms, for these red blood cell pathogens, and with some anecdotal benefit, right? And so when we put this herb into these three different, basically there's three different studies that we did. The first one was on Borrelia burgdorferi, or Lyme disease. The second one was on Babesia duncani, and the third one was on Bartonella henselae, using these and other botanical medicines and natural products. So Cryptolepis, in addition to, we did find it was active against Babesia, but we also found that it was the most active herb against Lyme disease, Borrelia burgdorferi, as well as Bartonella. And so these are really, we were really excited about this work. This is a really novel finding, very groundbreaking. And so to pull that out and to then say to practitioners, and again, backing up for a sec, like, how did we pick these herbs in the first place? Basically we went out there and said, okay, well, what are people already using? Let's make sure they're safe. Let's make sure they're well tolerated, and let's make sure they have good systemic absorption, right? And so we picked the products from that. So these are already in use. And so be able to then go back out and say, okay, let's keep using this for, and again, we have to be a little careful how we extrapolate this from an in vitro study to human or animal use. But given that these were already being used, it now makes sense. And I think a lot of us in the field pivoted a bit at that point to yes, let's use this for that idea of Babesia, but let's also start looking at this for Lyme disease and for Bartonella. And we know, again, it's been, has a very long use. It's been used in China, it's been used in India, in Africa. And, basically, again, really, it's been known to be a really strong antibacterial herb. It also has been shown to have anti-inflammatory effects, anti-amoebic effects, anti-cancer, and as we talked about, anti-malaria. So yeah, Cryptolepis was kind of one of the stars of the show.
It's really interesting. I was thinking a couple of things. One is, I love the fact that when I give somebody Cryptolepis for Babesia, just from a traditional trial of, therapeutic trial, it makes sense symptomatically, the traditional uses, let's try it in my patient. One of the things that's been so helpful about the research you've done is that I actually now know that if someone has a flare that I'm having a hard time reading, I understand that it's got broader uses than I actually previously may have thought. And I think that just makes it easier to navigate for our patients, which is really helpful. And then the other thing that you made me think of as you're sharing about that is when people started, like Tokar's and their group has done a lot of work with what's actually in a black-legged tick, or the Ixodes scapularis, and which is the common deer tick here on the East Coast. And the thing that's so interesting to me is we found a few things in these that we didn't think we were going to find, including like this nematode. So I'm like, I don't know if the nematode's getting transmitted, but years ago, they used to tell me Borrelia miyamotoi was in a deer tick and people didn't get it. And lo and behold, 30 years later, we found out, yeah, they did. So being able to give something that we know works for Babesia duncani, Bartonella henselae, Borrelia burgdorferi, and may also be able to treat some of the other things that we're not sure what to do with in something that's been safe to use. It's just amazing to me. So
yeah, that's absolutely true. And the other thing I want to highlight, I want to go back to what you said before about, using antibiotics and or using botanical medicines to kill these bugs. That's only part of the story, right? So a lot of these herbs, including, we'll talk about Polygonum cuspidatum, or Japanese knotweed, next, but a lot of these herbs, maybe in part they are doing some antimicrobial killing work, but they also have these really incredible anti-inflammatory effects and immune modulating effects. And sometimes, you don't necessarily have to kill the bugs per se. You have to get the body to realign with its inflammatory cascades, with its cytokine cascades. And if you can make that inflammation quiet down or go away, basically the bugs can't live anymore, right? So it's like sort of a circle of respecting the inner mechanisms of the body. But again, when you're mixing and matching these plants, you're using, cryptolepis. It has these amazing antimicrobial effects, but it also has these anti-inflammatory effects, right? And so again, very impressive, very really elegant, mechanisms in these plants that are, light years ahead of our very simplistic antibiotics. Not to say that they all, that we use them all together for good efficacy, as you do in your practice, but we love that combo.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm thinking about it. It's like I learned so much from treating kids, and Charles Ray Jones taught me about infection-induced autoimmune encephalitis as a sort of the broader way to look at pans and pandas, where kids get the infection and they get this autoimmune thing, and then their behavior changes. And when I step back, Sунджья, and I look at it, I call it a toxin-induced, because there's more than just infections that trigger this autoimmune inflammation, because I know it doesn't have to just be your brain, it could be your body. And I'm like, you just highlighted the way I structure a treatment plan obviously we can be more reductionist, but I'm like, what are the global things I don't want to miss? Well, I want to work on bringing the toxin load down. I want to modulate the immune system. I want to bring down some inflammation, and the other part of it that's so interesting to me is I like to be a little bit disobedient in my life. I just because I want to push the envelope. So, when I treated pneumonia in the hospital, if I were to treat it and then I were to stop the antibiotic and it came back, they would just say, oh, just restart the same thing. I'm like, well, why? And they're like, well, because it's still there. And I go, well, didn't our antibiotic just cure it? And they're like, well, every doctor I've ever talked to is like, no, the antibiotic doesn't cure it. It does exactly what it did, a little bit down on the load of the bacteria until the body's self-regulatory self-healing mechanism can get back on track. The difference is we just wait for that in conventional medicine. And the antibiotic is doing one of like 3 and probably 23 prongs of things. So I think the herbs are so nice. They're doing a little bit of all of that at the same exact time. And just to highlight what you said, we're respecting the body's ability to heal. So rather than looking at the body as like a bucket of illness and disease, we're like, hey, this is a beautiful self-healing mechanism that's goal is to be healthy. And if it's not, we just need to catalyze a little bit of healing. And I think, as you alluded to, we've got things like Japanese knotweed and some others. So what's the scoop with knotweed?
Yeah, let me get to that. I just want to jump off what you said too.
Yeah, absolutely.
For everyone out there who's watching this summit, what you just said, Tom, is so critical when it comes, and I think a lot of people know this, but it just serves to re-emphasize the importance of all the foundational lifestyle supports that we can do. Whether that's clean diet and anti-inflammatory nutrition protocols, whether it's healing your gut and working on your gut health, whether it's working on your brain and neuroplasticity and emotional healing, whether it's movement and exercises, getting the right amount of sleep. And I did a deep dive with Drew Perwitt on his podcast a couple of weeks ago on sleep. And all of these factors, hormones and mold, and all these factors are really essential to address because of all the things we just talked about, right? Like you said, with antibiotics, you can't just kill your way to health, right? You need that immune system to kick in. You need the body's natural detox mechanisms. You need all those factors, the inflammation control mechanisms to kick in. And when you're out there and you're struggling with this illness and you're trying to get your ship back on course, please don't underestimate the power of all these different effects. And it's not just woo-woo. It's basically like these have very direct, immediate effects on inflammation, on immune system, on autoimmune triggering, on your hormones, on all these aspects of your health. So it's real science. It's real science on how all those lifestyle factors work.
Well, it's so interesting because I love you and you're saying I did deep dive on sleep. I'm like, yes, because I'm like I'm an anatomy nerd, being an osteopath. I love how all this works. But it's like, if you think about the intersection between pans and pandas, mycotoxin illness, and brain inflammation, I mean, it all boils down to this lymphatic detoxification of the brain. And all these people are like, oh, I want the best supplement for brain detox and I want the best thing for that. I'm like, well, the number one thing for healing, I mean, for brain detox would be going to bed and getting really good sleep, right?
Yeah. Good sleep. Yeah. So we're actually curious to hear your thoughts on this. We're on a little detour right now of our talk, but we're actually looking at maybe doing home sleep testing, like sort of sleep apnea home device as a frontline test just on everybody. Like, we want to know, well, what's the quality of your sleep? Are you sleeping? Are you getting, enough deep sleep? Are you getting the right cycle? What's the pattern? Enough hours? And are you having hypopneic events, where you're stopping breathing, or, because that's like actually a really critical roadblock. So again, everyone out there, do everything you can to dial in all the sleep hygiene pieces. One of my favorite personal hacks that I've really been pulling the lever on these days is getting outside first thing in the morning, getting morning light on your eyeballs, right? 15 minutes, walk around, 20 minutes, get out there. That's incredible. It feels like you just drank a cup of coffee and your brain's just like is working, so, and then that's also super important because it tells your body what's the start point of the day. And then your body has a much easier time understanding when the end point is and when sleep's supposed to happen.
Dude, I love it's like one of my favorite hacks as well, because it's like everybody thinks melatonin is a pill you take at bedtime, or when it's dark, it comes out. I'm like, getting out in the light in the morning is what triggers your body to actually make it. And again, going back to respecting your body. So I just think, that's the beauty of this, is when we talk about the botanical medicines, all the detours are because we're talking about giving your body the nourishment for it to catalyze the natural self-healing. And like, it's just like, we're all looking for like the device or the pill or the whatever, but it's the package where we treat you as this unique human you are and love and respect ourselves. And I love it, Sundhya. Like I don't really prepare a lot of people. And there's been a few people who get mad at me for the interview. Like, well, they want to know exactly what we're doing. I'm like, I want to roll with it because everyone in the whole summit brings up the most important. That's why everyone is here. That's why you're here, because you know how to heal human beings. And you're not just treating Lyme disease with herbs, even though that we need to finish talking about the herbs, but it's this thing of like being so respectful. And then my goal for everyone here is to have an experience that they're so worthy of healing, because we want them to be able to shine their light out in the world. This world needs each and every one of you to share your unique gifts, whether you think they're unique or not. What's in your heart, I want it to come out. And one of those things is by loving and respecting yourself and getting your ass in bed on time, turning off the crap, turning off your Wi-Fi, and then getting up in the morning and celebrating life by getting some of that fresh air. And I kind of have a similar morning hack, Sundhya. I just happen to include one of these with it. So.
Yeah. So, and that's the other thing, hydration first thing in the morning. Chug 16 ounces of water with some Himalayan salt, or there you go, or some electrolytes in it, and try to get 30 plus ounces by 11 or 12 a.m. 12 in the afternoon, 11 in the morning, 12 in the afternoon. So hydration and morning light, those are a couple of my favorite. And right before bed, I love what you just said. That was amazing, Tom, by the way, that little pithy segment of respecting yourself, loving yourself, supporting yourself. I want to pause there and just kind of like, give some love to everyone out there who's watching this, because we get it. We understand that you are going through the mill and that this is so hard and so traumatic, and that there's so many detours and dead ends that you go down, and doctors who you see that can't help you. I think doctors in general are amazing people, but they maybe just don't have the toolkit, and maybe they don't have the time, and maybe they're stressed, and so it comes off in dismissive and frankly traumatic ways. And so we just want you to know that you can get better, that there's hope out there, and that it involves all the things we're talking about, seeing the right practitioner, getting the right, medications if those are appropriate, getting the right botanical medicines if those are appropriate, nailing down all the lifestyle pieces, getting the help that you need to nail down those lifestyle pieces. Health behavior change is not easy. It takes work, it takes habit formation, and but with that right mix, the way I kind of think of it is like, it's like you have you're a conductor, and you want to have this new symphony play this piece of music, and so you have to basically gather all the musicians, you have to give them all the music, you have to get all the instruments tuned up, you have to have them all practice, you have to get the timing right, and after a good period of time, this symphony starts to sound really beautiful, right? And so that's kind of how I look at this path of getting better.
Damn, I'm just gonna wait a second. But this is what I'm talking about, man. This is why we're all here together sharing this with other people, because we know how hard it is. And but together we can get it done. And that's why I love all of this. And I would love to, maybe we'll find some time to do a little extra after the summit and bring even more of this to people. And I know at the end, we'll let people know how they can get a little more of a flavor and a taste for what you do. Because we're kind of giving them a teaser now, but if people want to dive in with you, just stick around to the end, everybody, and we'll let you know how to get in touch with Dr. Schweig and work with his group. Because this is why he's here. I mean, I was joking in one of the other interviews that you either will or have seen, depending upon how we order things. Like, everyone here is a really good friend, whether they've been a friend for a long time, like Sунджья, or they're a newer friend, but we resonate. But it's because we're all vibrating, as one of my mentors said, vibrating on the higher vibrational frequency of love. And when we treat people from this place of love, respect, and compassion, then we know, and she says, oh, then whatever you do will work. But I'll add to that a little bit, because I know what she's saying in her head, because I spent 2 decades training with this particular person I'm thinking of, is when we're resonating in this place of love and joy in our heart, and that compassion and self-respect and self-love, most importantly, then we know what the right tools to grab are, because they're vibrating at the frequency that you need in the moment, which is why I say in almost every interview, we no longer need to compare ourselves to how other people are healing. This is about you healing in your own unique way. And the only way to know that is for you and your doctor, your healthcare practitioner, to be resonating at the place that Sунджья was just describing. So we could talk about this part of it for probably ever. Why don't we dive into it?
Let's talk Japanese knotweed, right?
Yeah, exactly. This is what I love. Like, everybody's like, I feel like what you said a minute ago is like the closing mic drop. All right, we're done our interview. I'm like, no, why would we wait till the end to save the best? Like, why the best for last? Let's just drop it right when it's perfect timing. So knotweed.
So back to our friends, these botanical medicines, we talked about Cryptolepis sanguinolenta. And so Japanese knotweed, or Polygonum cuspidatum, really amazing plant, botanical medicine. And we also saw in all 3 studies, with Borrelia burgdorferi, with Babesia duncani, with Bartonella henselae, that Polygonum cuspidatum did show good inhibitory effects. And we know that the polyphenol resveratrol is one of the main active ingredients, active constituents in Polygonum. And there's some research in previous studies showing in vitro testing documenting resveratrol's activity in Borrelia burgdorferi as well as Borrelia garenia. So it's, it has some history there, which kind of clued us in also. It's also one of the core herbs in Stephen Buhner's work, his work with herbal medicines for Lyme and co-infections. So basically, it's a very safe herb also, minimal toxicity in human and animal studies. It's only been a limited number of human studies, but the available data that we do have out there did show significant reduction in inflammation, in oxidative stress. So it was cool to see in the in vitro model that this botanical medicine did have antimicrobial effects, which has been shown before, but in particular, we've always also thought of it as a really nice anti-inflammatory support, and so again, 60 different constituents, like we talked about before, a lot of different things happening in this whole plant, wide variety of different mechanisms of actions, and can be helpful for blood pressure, for high triglycerides, for high cholesterol, for weight loss, metabolic syndrome, cognitive performance, probably endothelial cell function. Probably, again, a lot of those mechanisms are leveraging the anti-inflammatory capacity, right? There's some ties that could connect things there. But again, active in all 3 of these plants, not as strong as Cryptolepis in killing the persister. There was some regrowth, meaning, we took these microbes, we treated them with the botanical medicines, we then measured how much of those microbes were killed, and then the plates were washed, set aside, and left to regrow for 7 to 21 days. And so Cryptolepis was really the one that showed the strongest efficacy of killing those, the ability of those bugs to come back. But again, Japanese knotweed was active against all 3. And so, one thing to note on Japanese knotweed, if you've probably seen this in your practice, is that it can cause some stomach upset. So when you're dosing it, do start low and ramp up, and just be aware that it can cause some abdominal pain or diarrhea even. But this will stop when you pause. And so otherwise, we do know that it's well absorbed, rapidly metabolized, and yeah, just a really, really powerful medicine.
Nice. Yeah, I love it. I mean, I just think that it's got so many actions. And I mean, I think, just to reiterate, it wasn't studied in a full human system. And I think that when you look at exactly what, and I think maybe I don't want to put words or thoughts in Buhner's mouth or mine, but it's like, hey, I mean, we're looking and maybe it didn't do 100% what cryptolepis did, but when you get all those other properties that you highlighted, then you optimize the human system more, which then allows the human, the body to do the rest of the antimicrobial work. So, and what are there other big herbs here that came out of the study that we should be aware of that have similar properties?
Yeah, another couple that were really wonderful and really interesting to expand on what's out there already would be Artemisia and skullcap, Scutellaria bicalensis, Chinese skullcap.
I'm so good. I'm so happy to know I pronounced Scutellaria bicalensis correctly, because most people stop at bical because it's so long.
Right, bical skullcap, right, exactly. Yeah, I mean, so Artemisia in the first 2 studies that we did against Lyme and Babesia did show activity. And this was one of the first studies that we're aware of showing the activity of Artemisia against Borrelia burgdorferi, right? It has been used in the past for malaria. That's kind of where it got its claim to fame. It was discovered, by a Chinese scientist who was actually the active component artemisinin was isolated by the scientists, and he was actually awarded the Nobel Prize in 2015 for this because of how powerful artemisinin has been for reducing malaria illness and morbidity and mortality, right? So we knew that there was, some potential benefit against a malaria-like pathogen of Babesia, but the Borrelia burgdorferi findings were pretty impressive. And so Scutellaria bicalensis, in the first and second studies that we did, was also active against Lyme and Babesia. This is a very widely used plant. I think along with Japanese knotweed, I think of Scutellaria and Japanese knotweed as very powerful anti-inflammatory herbs, right? This was one of the core herbs that also emerged around support for COVID-19, given the cytokine storm and the inflammation. It has antibacterial, antimicrobial, even possibly antiviral effects. And so, yeah, really powerful medicine.
I love it. What a great overview of these things. And like I said, these are 4 of the key herbs in our practice all the time. And I think I became an osteopath by accident, which is basically like I followed my heart, because I grew up, I didn't know any of this stuff. I thought Coca-Cola and Dorito type chips and, even a 6-pack were like food groups, and pizzas. And we just didn't have access to this. And then it's like, as I've gone through this journey, Sundja, it's like, I'm like, oh yeah, I kind of innately knew that the body was such a beautiful temple that we all heard about in one form or another growing up, but it's like, now we can really start to dive into just how amazing not just our body is, but I think one of the things I've read, I remember about you is you're really looking at, the kind of this data-driven ecosystem around prevention and reversal of chronic illness. And one of the things that really strikes me as we're having this conversation, and I'm getting chills again, it's like, yeah, it's because you're speaking my languages. It's not just that I have to respect my own body for its individuality, but I also am respecting the entire ecosystem that I live in. And then when you go back to the top of our conversation, we're doing this work because when we help heal other people, we're helping to heal ourselves. And one of the messages I always like to share to parents who have kids who might be struggling or partners who are struggling, it's and even friends, we have so much influence over those around us. They're always looking to us for guidance because we're in this together. We're in this interrelationship. And right now I'm hearing all this about these herbs. And I'm like, even though I live this and I know this, I think I've just gotten a much deeper understanding of how integrally related we are to these plants. And
yeah,
one other thing that because I want to give you an opportunity now that we've gone over all this to really bring us home with any closing thoughts and let people know where to find you. But it's like this opportunity to, just resonate with life and kind of drop back into the sacredness of the whole thing. And I had another thought which left me, but it's probably because it's more important to hear, as you bring this all together and you're looking at the combination of all these things, and helping people get better. Are there any kind of thoughts that we haven't touched on or closing things to wrap this up that, give people hope for, their healing process?
Yeah. So, yeah, thank you for those thoughts. Those are really powerful. And I think that we all live in this realm of uncertainty around Lyme disease and co-infections, and how do we treat these things, and how do we diagnose them, and do the tests work, do the tests not work? What do the specialists say? What does your Lyme doctor say? And so there's a lot of just uncertainty, and a lot of schism, and a lot of confusion out there. And but one thing that we do know is that these bugs are very persistent, right? And they've been around. When I give talks on this, I like to show a tree, a mock-up of the evolution of life as we know it today, right? And we're up at the outer leaves and branches of this tree, where that's where you find primates and humans evolutionarily. And down at the very bottom of that tree, like over 4 billion years ago, are the ancestors of today's spirochete bacteria. So they've basically been around forever, right? They just watched us evolve. They've got us kind of figured out. And so we can't just go in guns blaring and expect to effectively eradicate these. And these concepts are still becoming, I think, digested and metabolized by modern medicine and researchers, and it's not totally well understood, even though there's a huge research base showing this persister phenomenon and showing that Lyme can do this. People like Monica Embers out of Tulane, and so the ID docs and the folks who aren't believing this are just not really looking deeply and in a nuanced way at that research as it emerges. And I think that we have to understand that if we're going to have success with treating these persistent bugs, that we basically have to be more persistent, right? We just have to stay engaged. We have to stay on top of it. We have to listen. We have to trust you as the patient. We have to understand your symptoms and what that tells us about what's happening inside your body. We have to engage all of these lifestyle factors. And yeah, that's where I get really excited about the data, right? If we're going to use a wearable, like the Oura Ring or a variety of other wearables, we can see a physiological phenotype then of what's happening inside of your body. And we can understand, okay, look, here things got a little bit better. What was happening there? Here things got a little bit worse. What was happening there? And it can help us dial things in and really see visually a little bit better. So that marriage of the wearable data along with the patient-reported data, the symptom data, we call that patient-reported outcome measures or PROMs. That marriage of those couple of things, along with hearing the patient's story, I think has a huge potential to revolutionize how we are practicing medicine and how we're dealing with chronic illnesses of all types. And that's one of the passions of mine that we've really built into our clinic. We have a really comprehensive care team. I feel really honored to work with this set of really amazing people. And we basically ask people to work with the whole team. And so they might see the doctor, the nurse practitioner, they're going to work with the nutritionist, they're going to work with the health coach. We're going to try to get some data flowing on them so we can have a visualization of what's happening to them over time. We ask the patients to do a lot of work and track symptoms with us over time. And so there's that combination of everything together. We think of it as high touch with this care team and high tech with the data side. It's really an incredible time right now with medicine, and I get super excited and optimistic.
Well, Sundja, I mean, when I hear the care team, that's what we need. We're caring for a whole person, not just for a disease or an illness. So I've always been so, in awe of how you put it together, because it can be hard to do, but also even more inspired because your team is leading and showing us all a light in this, sort of proverbial darkness, but you're showing us a new path, and you guys are all walking the walk. So I appreciate that so much. And I'm so honored to have you here, because this is what we need to have the conversation. We don't need to run away from science or just run away from the unknown, but we bring it all together for people's
so much value on all sides, right? It's like the respect that we can have for all aspects of this work, and the individual as the center of the work, the patient, the person recovering, and us as clinicians too, trying to have all of our voices be heard. There's a lot of amazing opportunity.
It's so good. So I'm sure at this point, everybody watching is wanting to go how can I learn more about what Dr. Shwaig is doing and where your work, and potentially even, finding out more about the programs you offer to the public, and if they need to see a doctor and be part of your care team, where can people reach out to you?
Yeah, so I'm the founder and director of the California Center for Functional Medicine. We are located in California, however, we are virtual. And so we do take care of patients all over the US. And, basically people can come to our website, which is www.ccfmed.com. and you have a bunch of information there. There's information on Lyme, on functional medicine, on COVID, on a variety of different health conditions, as well as explanations on how to become a patient. We just launched. We also have a lot of patient programs on there that are available to anybody, whether you're a patient or not. Programs around sleep, around breath work, around healing your gut, around nutrition, so metabolic, hormone health, et cetera. We're really trying to provide as much of this information as possible to people and meet them where they are, with whatever they can afford. In that vein, we actually just launched a new service called the Functional Medicine Checkup, which is a $500 2-visit series where we see you, we take a deep dive history, we order a bunch of labs, blood tests, 75 or more different markers, and then we meet with you to talk about what they all mean, some steps that you can take to optimize your health, and hopefully try to get you pointed on the path to recovery. So if you're curious, come and check us out, and we're happy to work with you in any capacity that's appropriate.
Cool. Well, thank you so much. It's been so inspiring. And as a reminder to everyone watching, we'll just head over to our Summit resource page. We'll have all of Sунджья's contact information. So if you didn't write it down, but again, it's ccfmed.com. And Sунджья Швейг, thanks so much for joining me. It's been so great. I mean, it's always fun when we get a chance to hang out and talk, but I mean, today is one of the most inspiring chats I've had in a really long time. And I just want to say thanks for making the time to share your passion, both today, but also all this research work for the betterment of humankind. It's all inspiring. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. Thank you for your effort. I know that coming in today, I kind of knew what we were going to be talking about. I thought it was going to be a pretty traditional download of information. I just want to say how fun it is to have this bigger conversation and to think about the heart and soul of what we're doing. And so I just think that everyone out there, I'm excited to get this information out to you. I'm really excited and grateful that you're putting all the time and effort into making this happen. And so onwards.
So thank you very much. So much gratitude. And everyone, lots of love and gratitude to you for tuning in to this episode of the Healing from Lyme Disease Summit, and to all the other ones. And like we've been saying, our goal is for you to grab a little piece of something that inspires you so that we can help you take that next step in healing, and then shine that amazing light in your heart out for the world to see. We can all do this together. We are part of this interrelated ecosystem. So I'm just so honored to have you all here with us, with Dr. Sунджья Швейг. And again, thanks for joining us for the summit. And Dr. Tom Moorcroft out. I'll see you in the next episode.